Hello and welcome to another edition of The Front Page on GNet TV. My name is Andrew McKeever, the managing editor of the Manchester Journal, and I'll be your host today. And today it's my pleasure to have with me here in the studios of GNet two gentlemen who will be talking to us a little bit about animal care. On my right is Steve Dunning, who's the co-owner of Circa 50, a store on Main Street in Manchester. And to my left is Doug Radziewicz, who is the executive director of the Second Chance Animal Center in Shaftesbury.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Great to have you both here. So we're here to talk about, I guess, what we could sort of frivolously call a warm and fuzzy subject, animal care. But there's more to it than that sort of happy picture. And Doug, tell us a little bit, just to get us started, about Second Chance. What do you folks do down there, and what is your policy for helping folks adopt animals?
Gosh, when we try to answer a question like that, we can spend hours simply because our mission is so important to us. And to try to put it in simple, easy to remember terms, our responsibility is to provide the best possible care for animals that need it. And when I say the animals that need it, these are the animals that, for one reason or another, they've either been neglected, abandoned, abused, lost, and they find their way to our shelter. And while they're under our care, we want to make sure that they get the things that either have been missing or the things that they need to prepare for into their next home.
Okay. Now, I understand that not all shelters are alike, that there are differences between them, and yours is one that follows a non-euthanization policy or a no-kill policy.
Right.
Others do not. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why some shelters have a policy one way or the other?
It's a really sensitive subject because shelters, for the most part, are private, nonprofit organizations, and they don't fall under a national group that dictates to them what they need to do, how they need to do it. Really, animal shelters like Second Chance, we have our own mission in place. And with having our mission in place, we may be a little bit different, a whole lot different, or very similar to other animal shelter groups that are out there. And for the most part, they're in it for the same reason. They want to help animals. But for Second Chance, when the board of directors decided to move forward with a mission statement that we were going to be, and the term is typically used is no kill. Sometimes it's referred to as low kill. And now it seems to be softening a little bit because using a word in animal shelters like kill is really difficult. And it's difficult for the employees and the volunteers and the people who support an organization like Second Chance. So terms like low euthanasia or no euthanasia seem to fit more along the lines of the mission. Now, how we're different is that we selected the mission to be low or no euthanasia. And that's something that's really important to us because we feel that animals who come to our shelter should not be euthanized after a period of time. They should be allowed to stay with us until there is a home available to them. So when an animal comes in, we don't put a date on it to say that after a period of time, if it's not adopted, it's euthanized. We don't do that. It's just not what we believe at Second Chance. We feel that they should be given as much time as they need. And what we've done, because we have such a successful program in doing this, is that when we have space, they come in. When people need help, we take them in. If somebody says, well, I'd like to surrender my dog to you, and our kennel is full, then we put them on a waiting list. And when people ask, well, why a waiting list? And we explain to them that we don't want to euthanize for space or time, they really understand it. And they want to work with us and hold on to their dog either through a friend, a relative, until we have space, and then they bring it in. Because when people do have to give up their pet, sometimes it's heartbreaking for them. And we want to be able to help them in that process. But when they know that the animal is going to have a time limit or a space requirement, that helps working with us.
So in theory then, would a cat or a dog that's turned over to you, and I suppose there are a wide variety of other
more than cats and dogs
types of animals. I mean, in theory, might they be residents of your center for an indefinite period of time? Is
Sure. And whereas people may look at like, why, gosh, how could an animal be happy in a shelter environment? We're not defensive about that, but we take pride in what we do at the shelter. And Steve could give plenty of examples for this because he spends so much time at the shelter. We provide the animals with love and attention besides quality food and water and toys and enrichment and plenty of space and exercise and interacting with other animals of their species. And when we're allowed to do that, and there are so many examples, Andrew, that we've seen animals come to us that are stressed, have had a difficult life, have been unsocialized, have had so many behavioral issues, but when they get to the shelter, consistency comes into their life. And they get the things that often have been missing, and that is love, and that is attention and affection. And when you can combine all those things, and you can give that back to the animal, when that right person or family comes along to adopt, gosh, so many times we say, they're leaving here better off than when they got here. And that's something we're really happy about.
Well, that seems like the place where you come in, Steve. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Second Chance, because I know that you're deeply involved in a fundraising project with them, and but I think there must have been a starting point somehow or another.
There was 2 years ago. I adopted a blind cat.
A blind cat?
A blind cat from Second Chance. And I was so overwhelmed when we were ready to take him home, and everyone from the shelter came around and just held Teddy on his back as he liked to be held, kind of rocking him like a baby, saying, "Goodbye, Ted. You're going into a good home now." And I was just, wow, I was overwhelmed by all of these people. Like Doug said, loved this cat for the few months that he was there. I said, I need to do something for this organization. They do such a good job. So I came up with an idea to create a fundraiser. And the initial idea was to create a fishbowl to raise money, thinking it's sort of animal related. You know? And the more I thought about it, I said, not everyone wants to have a fish. So you're kind of limiting the number of people.
No. There's a lot of cats around.
I was going to say, wow, I didn't. Okay. Anyway, so the fishbowl went.
Well, it just became more generic in its shape. As a matter of fact, I brought an example if you'd like to see it.
Oh, okay.
Here is the container, and this is made by Andrew Weil at Manchester Hot Glass.
Oh, sure.
On Elm Street.
Elm Street, yeah.
And the insignia says, "Give a second chance." And they're made one at a time, handmade. And so we're raising money by selling these containers. And the full amount goes to the Second Chance. And the second thing that we're doing now is we're offering this wooden dove that's made in Switzerland. And again, the full purchase price is given to the Second Chance for our ultimate goal of an adoption van, so that they can go out to farmers markets, for instance, and show the animals to the public and perhaps do some adoptions.
So this would be a van that would carry around dogs and cats and other potential pets, go on the road, so to speak, and people could come in and have a look at them at these various public events and decide if they wanted to adopt the animal or not.
Yes, exactly. This van is quite large. It's 26 feet long. It has 30 kennels on the inside. It has walls, exterior walls that roll up, exposing the kennels on the inside. So people from outside the van can view the animals, and if they want to, they can go inside and handle them.
Oh, okay. So this would, I guess, address an issue of what? Of being able to expose a greater slice of the public to kind of the fact that there are, you basically have a very tight situation in terms of being able to house some of these pets that are turned over to you and that they are there and need homes.
You're exactly right. When you manage a shelter and you have your animals that are up for adoption, you're sometimes limited in space. You're limited in the number of people who can come see the animals that are up for adoption. And with this concept of having a portable adoption unit, for us to expand our outreach with what we do, and our focus is to not only provide temporary homes, but of course, to provide permanent homes through adoption. If we can expand what we're doing with our mission and get out on the road and get to locations strategically that don't have a shelter in their area, or it's difficult for people to get to their shelter because of the distance or lack of time or just another difficulty in their schedule, we want to be there for them. And if we can get out there and we can get more animals seen and more animals adopted, then we're just expanding our mission even more. And one of the things that we always follow in a shelter is that when you have space, you can take in more. When you take in more, you're helping more. And that's what we're about, is helping as many as we can. So when Steve approached us with this idea, and to be able to get out there and to get to areas that really would like to adopt, but where we are located in Vermont, I mean, there are shelters in neighboring states, but it's not as though they're exactly close. And we just want to do our part and get out there and get more adopted.
So a van that size sounds like it probably costs a fair amount of money.
It does.
$120,000?
120,
okay.
roughly.
And so you still have a ways to go, I guess.
A ways. We've raised $30,000 for this van.
Okay. Well, that's, is there some point when you could acquire it and then like pay off the balance as you go along, or are you going to try and fundraise the entire amount first before?
Perhaps trying to raise the full amount. What Doug and I were discussing several months ago was perhaps we can reach a point where we have, say, half of the amount in the bank. Right. And then we can approach funding organizations and say, look, we've done this much.
Right. Can
you match, equal that so we can purchase this van? So that may be a possibility as well.
Okay.
But
just out of curiosity, Doug, what's the average waiting length of time for a pet to be adopted? I mean, it's 30 days, 60 days?
To be adopted? Wow. It's a great statistic that we wish we could supply. But when we're thinking of dogs and cats, the number of cats that come into a shelter is easily 4 or 5 to 1 compared to dogs coming in. Mm-hmm. And New England is known, especially Vermont, for being very dog friendly and so many households having dogs. Dogs come to our shelter and they go out a lot faster than cats. And that might be just simply because of the ratio, or that just might be what the population likes maybe a little bit more. And we're not competing dogs against cats at the shelter by any means, but we would like to see it increase, and that's where the adoption vehicle, the adoption van, the adoption transport, mobile, whatever great name we come up, in the end, will help with these cats, because there are some cats that go up for adoption at the shelter, and in one day they're gone. And you love it. It's terrific. And then you have this 3-year-old, 4-year-old adult cat that was brought to the shelter because someone was moving. Cat is social, friendly, beautiful. And it's there for 2 months. And we all scratch our heads saying, I don't get it. Why? And it's timing.
Right.
It's who comes into the shelter and what they're looking for and what they're trying to get. So we have our, I wouldn't call them little tricks, but sometimes people come to the shelter with so focused, I want a domestic medium hair. It has to be orange with white stripes, and it has to be a male. So what we do on some of our cat cottages, our cages, we'll give them a name because they all have names. We would never not give them a name. But we don't always say right away their age, and we don't always tell them if it's a male or female, because we want them to fall in love with the look and the personality. And then they can go to our adoption profile book and they can look and say, I had no idea. Because we feel that if we let them fall in love with it,
Everything else will take care of itself.
Right. So just back to your question about statistical and numbers, I would say certainly with dogs, it would be less than 2 weeks, and with cats, I would say less than a month, just to give you a rough estimate. But we've had some cats that have been with us for 1.5 years.
Now, what are some of the other animals then that you have besides dogs and cats?
Well, we always refer to them as companion animals because that's what they are, because they're domestic.
Right.
It's going to be the rodent variety, which we might have rats and mice, gerbils and hamsters, guinea pigs. We'll have rabbits, ferrets. It's been a while, but we did have chinchillas that came to the shelter. We're not equipped properly for reptiles and amphibians or avian bird species.
Right.
So if they would come to our shelter, we quickly get them out either to a specialized rescue or somebody who has a better facility to equip. But we do very well with our adoptions of the smaller companion animals. And while they're at the shelter, what we try to do to the best of our ability is present them in much more suitable living conditions than where they came from. For example, you see bunnies that are put in wire boxes with wire mesh floors, and they live their life in a tiny little square. And when they come to the shelter, we show them that rabbits can be trained to use a litter box, that they can be in a large open area and they're social and friendly, that rats are meticulously clean if they're given the right environment. Ferrets, well, maybe they have a little bit of an odor, but it's not bad. And we do our part to educate as well, to make sure that when they leave the shelter, that the new guardians are going to provide as equal or maybe even better care.
So why do some people bring their animals to your shelter? I mean, why do people give up on their pets? Is that what's going on, or is it just something else besides?
I mean, Steve has seen so much with his time at the shelter and read over our profiles, and he would attest to that. People give up because they no longer have time for them. That's one of the reasons that we get. Another top reason is that they're moving and they haven't found a place that will allow them to take their pets. Sometimes we get very honest and very blunt answers, and I just don't want them anymore. The novelty of that puppy has worn off now that it's a year-old dog, or that kitten is now an adult cat and it's not cute anymore. And they stop socializing that rabbit after 2 weeks, and now it's just something that they don't want. So when some of us are at the shelter and these situations arise, that the animals come, it's easy to get disappointed or frustrated that, gosh, why did they have to give them up? But what we always tell everyone is, thank goodness they're here, because now they have an opportunity to get that we always like to call it a forever home with their next home. So those are just a few of the reasons. Sometimes we get some really odd ones. Some are genuinely sad because it might be a senior, an elderly person that has to go into assisted living. They can't take their pet, and oftentimes those are really tearful goodbyes.
So what's it like having a blind cat? It must be somewhat different. It doesn't catch mice, I guess.
Well, I thought, at first, I can't do this. It was my partner, Jeff, that said, let's adopt this cat. And I was thinking, this cat is going to be walking into walls all the time, and I don't have the time to take care of a cat like that. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. You would, if you came into my house, you would not be able to tell which cat was the blind one. He knows where everything is. He maneuvers around things. Things do change in our house, and he just works his way around them, and uses his whiskers to feel where things are, to sense where they are, smell, just knowing his surroundings.
So if this van is acquired, would you be one of the folks going to some of these events?
I hope
like
so.
We do
farmers
too.
Markets or whatever, and talking up the
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
whole thing. There's they would come up with what, 26 separate kennels? Is that how many would be on
Approximately.
that? Wow. Okay. Yeah. And would people be able to acquire the animals right there on the spot, or would there be a paperwork process and would have to follow down at the center itself?
Most often they can. Sometimes it's a little bit more challenging with dogs because of their size and the requirements. And when somebody comes and wants to adopt from the shelter or in an adoption event, we have a very simple procedure adoption application that people go through, because we want to be able to make sure that the animal that they want to adopt is going to be a good match. Mm-hmm. And we feel that's our responsibility, because sometimes we know intimately about the behavior or the temperament or the past history of these animals that are up for adoption, and sometimes the activity level of what's going to be in the home just might not be a good match, and we might give a different recommendation so that the animal doesn't become a return to shelter. Mm-hmm. So when we go out to adoption events, I will tell you that's why this adoption vehicle would be such an important piece for Second Chance. We have to load up a small minivan right now with pet crates, pet carriers. It's crammed. We usually don't have enough room, so we have to ask staff to use their vehicles. We have a caravan that goes to a particular site. We unload everything. We have to set up tables. We're dealing with the elements sometimes. And we're happy to do it because we're getting them out there. But to have a vehicle identified just for this would make everybody's life so much better, and really the animal's life so much better. So when we do the events and we would go out like this, oftentimes we can do the cat adoptions right on site. Sometimes it's hard when we have to check veterinary references to make sure that their pets at home are current on their vaccinations. But we're prepared. We bring on our telephone numbers for all the area veterinarians. We bring our cell phones, and we're ready to roll. But it's something that we're out there to get them adopted, and we don't want to hold up the process. So almost every time we get out there, they can go home that day.
So is the only limiting factor on the number of animals you would accept is simply the amount of space you have at the
Right.
center? I mean, you don't have any rules or restrictions on any other, like blindness obviously is not a...
No, we have no requirements. For example, we've
So
had,
anyone could just bring their animal over, and if there's space available, you'd be able to take it.
we always prefer that people call in advance, because we don't want them just to drive a long distance to realize that we're full. But when people do want to surrender, we want to get as much information from them as possible so that we know the past history. It might be medical history, it might be just how they were cared for, what their interests, likes, dislikes were, a good personality profile for them. And when we're able to do that, it just helps with the whole entire adoption process. And plus, we don't want to over-vaccinate animals, and that helps as well. So when we do that process, it just makes the whole system go so much smoother. And the shelter, I have to say, it's rare that we're not full to capacity. And there are times, especially early spring running well through the fall, we have so many cats and kittens. Typically our shelter is comfortable at around 12 dogs and 80 cats. That's a good, comfortable working number. But during the explosion of kitten season, our numbers jump up to 130 cats and kittens. And we use every available space at the shelter to accommodate the animals. And that's why being able to get more adopted goes back to what we originally talked about, is giving up more space to bring in more. And there's a long wish in shelters until there are none. That's when shelters will close. It's a big dream, but it's not going to happen. But if we can reduce numbers, because our animals that leave the shelter, everyone is spay and neutered, so we're not adding to the population of an overpopulation, and all our animals are rabies vaccinated. Everybody, felines are tested for feline AIDS and leukemia, ringworm tested. We make sure our dogs are heartworm tested and Lyme disease tested, and everybody's ready to go with their distemper, parvo, all those vaccinations to make sure that they leave healthy.
Now, Steve, would this be the first van of its kind in the state? I'm just wondering if
I believe it is. It would be.
I have never seen one, and I make it a point to look at other shelters and what they're doing to maybe get some good ideas. Never.
So you'd be doing it first then.
Let's do that. Yeah.
How, if someone wanted to help support this effort, how would they go about it? Would they call you or the
Well,
center,
they
or?
could come to Circa 50 and donate in one of the 3 ways that I mentioned, the glass bowl, purchasing the glass bowl or the dove. We're also giving a sizable donation for every ergonomic chair that we sell. So we're sitting in the...
Such as the ones we're enjoying right now.
Yeah.
So they could contribute in any of those 3 ways, or if they just want to make a financial contribution to the fund, we will accept that too.
Okay, make it real simple if you want. All right, well, that's interesting. You know, I hadn't realized that was such a problem. That it sounds like and it sounds like it's a growing problem where there are a lot of cats and dogs that have outstayed their welcome, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, at a home and need to find new quarters.
And we're no different or no exception from other shelters. They all go through the same challenge each day. And it is a challenge because you're always trying to have money to pay those bills, and bills come from running a business, which is a nonprofit business, maintaining a building, all the food, all the care, all the veterinary medicine, all the surgery, and to be able to do that properly takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of money, and other shelters have to go through the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both for being here on the
Thank
show to
you.
tell us about that. It's
My pleasure.
been interesting to learn about something one tends not to think about very much. And thank all of you for watching. This has been The Front Page on GNAT TV. My name's Andrew McKeever. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. We'll see you the next time. Anytime a building that's been around for a while and has been associated with pleasant memories of days gone by is demolished to make way for a newer structure, there's an understandable sense of sadness and sentimentality. Such is the case with the passing of the Sirloin Saloon, a family-style restaurant which served the community well for several decades. Before that, it housed a popular night spot known as the Five Flies, which a generation of residents who are now well into their years of eligibility for Social Security may remember with some fondness as a youthful playground where people danced and made merry. And before that, the area around the building was part of a cluster of small-scale manufacturers, which hugged the banks of the Battenkill and helped make that part of town known as Factory Point. Now a new complex of buildings, which may include a small-scale restaurant, but is more likely to be used mostly for retail, is coming to take the place of the former Sirloin Saloon. If one were to judge solely by the reactions that have been posted on the Manchester Journal's Facebook page, that's an unappealing prospect for many. How such an admittedly unscientific sampling of opinion reflects community sentiment at large is, of course, another question. Times change and the fortunes of businesses wax and wane, and clearly the marketplace decided that the last version of the Sirloin Saloon wasn't competitive enough to cut it in the current retail restaurant environment of Manchester. 10, 20, 30 years ago, it did, but not so much recently. Sentiment doesn't pay the rent. A profitable business does. It's far preferable for the site to be cleared and a new business spring up that will generate jobs and commercial activity, and for the building to slowly rot away and become an eyesore in the heart of town. We hope the new enterprise that will occupy that space will be a success and help move the regeneration of the downtown core along. To everything there is a season, the book of Ecclesiastes says, and that includes an ending. If we were never to tear down the old to make way for the new, we would be living in a static museum that would be at best unappealing. So long as the criteria involving the preservation of historic structures that still have a useful purpose are observed, the appropriate balance point between preservation and creative destruction can be struck. Anyone who has lived around here for more than a handful of years is likely to be able to remember dining at the Sirloin at least once or twice, and it's part of the recent fabric of the town that is sad to see go. Memory is a powerful thing. If the Sirloin could have survived as a viable restaurant, it would have. But as it turns out, it didn't. So something else will now take its place, and in due course, something else will replace that. At least, we hope it does. when that time arrives.